Welcome to the Marc Little Show, presented by Cure America Action. Here's your host, Marc Little.
This is the Marc Little Show. I am Marc Little. I am a pastor, a lawyer, and a political commentator. Welcome to the show today. Today's topic is Blacks and Donald Trump, the hidden truth. Blacks and Donald Trump, the hidden truth. As a young man, my father, Floyd Little, yes, Floyd Little from the Denver Broncos, my best friend and my dad, he led me to a love for boxing. There was and is nothing more electrifying than sitting ringside and witnessing champions battle for a title. That love for the sport was amplified when I represented some of the best fighters in boxing as a lawyer, the other side of my life. I won battles of my own representing one of the best in the business, Sugar Shane Mosley, from about 1999 and off and on until today. I've enjoyed his friendship and my representation over the years. But from this experience, I came to love the phrase, "Let's get ready." You know the rest. I can't say the rest. If you understand, this phrase was coined by my friend Michael Buffer, who owns that phrase. You can't utter it without his permission. But from boxing, I learned another phrase that is not so protected. It's called the tail of the tape. They compare the weight, they compare the reach, they can compare so many things, the age of the fighters. In this episode, I'll share the tail of the tape between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. That's what I'll do first. There are too many things that go into describing a good presidency, so I can't even try in these few moments. So I won't even try. But I will give my version of the tail of the tape. As a Black conservative, I'm asked all the time, why did I vote for Donald Trump in 2016? Why did I do that? I always find that question interesting, as if voting is monolithic in politics. It shouldn't be. For Blacks, unfortunately, it is, and that in and of itself tells you there's a problem. Some of my friends are even angry that I prayed and laid hands on President Trump in the cabinet room at the White House in February 2020, right before our Black History celebration. Truth is, a progressive like Hillary Clinton could never buy my vote, let alone earn it. As a conservative and Republican, my values guide my vote. For me, it is not a personality contest. It is not a beauty pageant, which apparently it has become for too many of us. When you get past the fact that we are not electing a pastor to the Oval, voting for the candidate that checks most of our priorities is easy, assuming you know what your values are, assuming you know what the priorities are. But that's a show for another day. So here is the tail of the tape between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, with an emphasis on what should draw Black voters to Trump this November. First, a short comparison between the two candidates. Then I'll share the meat of Trump's highlights during his presidency. So stay on until the end if you can. If you can't, just like the podcast, subscribe to the podcast for notifications if you get something from it, and download it, please. That really helps. Go ahead and download it. Now, first, polling. Heading into the general election this November, and as of January 31st, 2024, here's the polling. Trump, 45.9%. Biden, 43.5%. So in battleground states and nationally, Trump at this point in time in history is leading the incumbent Joe Biden. All right, here we go. Tail of the tape. On inflation. When Trump was in office, inflation between 2017 and 2021, inflation was 1.9%. For the current president, whose term is not yet over, Inflation is 5.7%. That's 2021 to this very day. That's high, folks. This is the marker that tells us what people are experiencing when they, as consumers, go out into the marketplace. The dollar is weakened under Joe Biden. You can buy less for the dollar today than under Donald Trump. This will be a key factor in the election. Unemployment under Donald Trump was a 50-year low, 3.5%. It's still low if you believe the numbers. Unemployment under Joe Biden is 3.7%. Here is the challenge. We often look at the wrong numbers. We should be looking at workforce participation. How many people are in the market working? We know that a lot of people are no longer looking. And so that impacts the unemployment number. We also know that for a lot of people, the government is paying us more to stay at home, from unemployment benefits to then disability. People are just sitting home on the couch and they get more doing that, unfortunately, than going and working. So that has to change. Black unemployment under Donald Trump was at an all-time low, 6%. Typically, Black unemployment is twice whatever the national average is. And under Biden, they say the low continues. It's now 5.7%. Yeah. The unemployment numbers as reported, I don't really pay a lot of attention to. You got to talk workforce participation. Home prices. Home ownership is one of the biggest ways Americans create wealth, and the recent run-up in prices has been a double-edged sword. Many first-time home buyers have been shut out of the market. But people who already own homes have benefited from soaring property values. So there's the double-edged sword there. People can't get into the market because of the high interest rates, but people who are in the market already as homeowners are experiencing the benefits of that. Homes are far less accessible under the Joe Biden administration. Home prices surged during the pandemic, rising 49% between spring of 2020 and the fall of 2022. Those higher prices have driven housing affordability to all-time lows. So during Joe Biden's presidency, the central bank has raised interest rates 11 times to try to rein in inflation. The bank controls the federal funds target range. Yeah. The interest rate banks use, the target rate is the interest rate that banks use to lend money to each other. That is at 5.25 to 5.5%. And it's at its highest level, get this, in 22 years. The bank-to-bank interest rate, 5.25 to 5.5%, the highest level in 22 years. People that go to the ballot box are going to be feeling that astronomical adjustment. And this results in higher borrowing costs for loans of all types, including mortgages. 7% now, 2.5 under Donald Trump. Interest rate for personal loans, it's up at 12%. My Lord. Credit card rate above 20%. Oh, they're killing it. They're killing it and killing us. This is one of the main areas where we currently suffer from Joe Biden's policies. Now, I'm getting to Donald Trump now. I'm getting to Donald Trump, but I've got to tackle this illegal immigration issue. This has proven to be the number one issue, even before the economy, for likely voters this year. My Lord, my Lord. You might remember that Barack Obama's Civil Rights Commission Richard Kirshner found that illegal immigration, stop this lumping in illegal with legal immigration. You've got to separate it when you talk about it. We are talking about illegal immigration, not legal immigration, where people come here through various visas, work visas and otherwise, student visas, etc. So the left often wants to make it appear that Republicans, in particular, are against legal immigration. They conflate it to confuse you. When you hear someone talking about immigration, make sure you listen for whether they're talking about illegal or legal immigration. I am talking about illegal immigration. And Obama's Civil Rights Commission found that illegal immigration disproportionately impacts Black workers. Now, that was the finding. That was the finding. So, illegal immigration is at an all-time high under this Biden administration. It's off the chains. We have an invasion. That's how bad it is. An invasion. Donald Trump invoked Title 42, allowing Border Patrol to deport quickly under a health emergency, such as COVID. Under this health emergency, it was distributed. COVID was distributed around the world. Now, that's what I said. It was intentional and it was distributed. That's right. We have since found all kinds of memos and so forth where Dr. Fauci was hiding the likelihood that this was created in a lab. But that's another podcast. Don't let me get off down that rabbit hole, please. I want to keep you listening for just a little bit. Donald Trump was successful at the southern border by invoking Title 42 in response to the health emergency that allowed his administration, Border Patrol, to get people out quickly. Don't forget that the Democrats wanted to get rid of ICE. They wanted to get rid of anybody who had the legal authority to deport people. So you've got to remember that this invasion is intentional. They've made that very clear. They said time and time again, we've got no crisis at the border. While our eyes saw a historical influx of illegal immigrants with bringing in fentanyl, dealing with sex trafficking of humans and children, not humans, of adults and minors. We know it's happening. They hang panties on the trees to show one their dirty deeds, but also to let people know what was really happening. And we, as a nation, turn a blind eye to one of the biggest industries in the world, and that is the sex trafficking of people, minors included. So anybody who is standing around allowing that to happen or acting like it's not happening should not be in leadership. Donald Trump had a zero tolerance policy for illegal immigration. Yeah, it helped prevent America from being inundated with illegal aliens. Zero tolerance policy, send them back. Trump also implemented the stay in Mexico policy for asylum seekers. People don't understand, they want us to be so compassionate about asylum seekers. They think we're stupid, and that's what's so frustrating. If you're seeking asylum is available to you in the next adjacent nation. Asylum doesn't mean you can come from Central America and pass through nation after nation until you get to our border, and then you cry, I'm seeking asylum. Well, if you seek an asylum, then you probably should have stopped two nations ago. It's all a ruse, and we're supposed to sit around and just act like we're ignorant. Oh, they're asylum seekers. Let them in. No, you stay in Mexico and apply. And if we approve you, then you can come in. That's what Donald Trump did, and that makes sense to any thinking person. Yeah. Instead of letting them in and waiting for their court hearing that never comes. Well, the court hearing might come, they just don't show up. That is what's happening at our southern border under this current administration. Trump also dealt with the wall. He had to fight tooth and nail, and we hear the common refrain that he didn't finish the wall. Well, here's the tale of the tape on that. Before Joe Biden stopped new construction on the wall, the Trump administration had built 458 miles of what is called the border wall system. Yeah. Some 226 miles, or nearly half of the total miles built, runs along the Arizona border. About 100 miles were constructed in New Mexico, and a total of 55 miles were built in Texas along the Rio Grande by El Paso. California saw the completion of construction of 77 miles of wall in areas along the border near San Diego and El Centro. So that's the wall. He fought. He didn't get Mexico to buy it, pay for it per se, based on his campaign promise. But that's neither here nor there. Did he build it? Yes. Did he finish it? No. But he did more than Joe Biden and Kamala Harris appear to care to do. And the idea that Joe Biden doesn't have the authority, give me the authority, he keeps shouting. It's a lie, folks. It's a lie. He has the authority. There's law on the books right now. And he thinks that, well, maybe he's right. His base is dumb. Maybe he's right. But he has the authority. He has chosen not to exercise it. So remember that when you hear him crying for Congress to give him the authority, it is a lie. And this work in the Senate to pass a bipartisan bill to respond to the crisis at the border, that's also a bunch of baloney. Baloney. It has now come out that the Senate is going to be presenting and probably passing, unfortunately, a bipartisan bill to allow 1.8 million illegal aliens into the country a year. That is not a bill. And it will be dead on arrival. Also, between 2017 and 21, under this current administration, no, that's Donald Trump, Border Patrol encountered 2.4 or 2,437,000 illegal crossings at the southern border. That's about 51,000 per month under Donald Trump. For Joe Biden, encounters are 3.5 times more than under Donald Trump. Let me say it again. Under Joe Biden, encounters are 3.5 times greater than they were under Donald Trump. Maybe they're inviting them to come has something to do with it, and maybe states like New York passing out now prepaid credit cards as a pilot program to migrants living in a hotel in New York. Maybe that has something to do with this invasion. Maybe when you clear out school buildings to house illegal aliens, I call them, and send students home for distant learning as they are doing in New York, maybe that has something to do with the invasion at the southern border. When you incentivize people to come, they come. And let's not fool ourselves. This invasion has everything to do with creating a underclass in the American society beholden to the Democrats. Let's be clear about it. And this is a present danger to Americans and to our way of life. When you are displacing students, when you are now using the emergency rooms of our hospitals as a place for treatment for people who don't have health insurance because they've come into this country illegally. Of course, if they're in California, they'll not only get health insurance, but they'll also probably get driver's licenses and a way to vote. Isn't that ultimately what they're after? This is a danger to our way of life and to our election system here in the United States of America. And we should not be abiding it. We need to stand up and stand against it. Now, on to the Donald Trump presidency, on to what we could call a very successful administration. Donald Trump had 3 legislative victories that are memorable. They're memorable. And now for black folk who want to understand what did Donald Trump do for black people, now is your time to tune in. Get your pens and paper, get your pencils out, get your paper out, because you're going to want to remember this. Download this podcast because you're going to want to go back to this, starting at this point in this podcast. You're going to want to start here. Under Donald Trump, prison reform is the first topic. Donald Trump did what prior presidents promised to do. He brought some measure of bipartisan prison reform. On December 21st, 2018, President Trump signed into law the First Step Act. The First Step Act. The act was the culmination of a bipartisan effort to improve criminal justice outcomes, as well as to reduce the size of the federal prison population, while also creating mechanisms to maintain public safety. Retroactive application of the Fair Sentencing Act reduced 100 to 1 crack cocaine sentencing disparities in 2010. Yeah. You might remember the crime bill 1994 that our current president put into place. Yeah. The First Step Act dialed back some of the impacts from over sentencing black people in particular. And this has benefited over 2,000 people with sentence reductions that average nearly 6 years. African Americans comprise 91% of those receiving these reductions. So yes, black people benefited. And I happen to be in a relationship with some of them. One person in particular was doing 25 to life. And because of the First Step Act, he is now home pastoring his wife and his sons, who he didn't know, didn't raise him. And now he has been restored to family. And it's a beautiful thing to see. Yeah. 342 people have been approved for the elderly home confinement pilot program under the First Step Act. 107 people received compassionate release sentence reductions. There was an expansion of good time credits implemented in July of that year, led to the release of approximately 3,000 in the federal prison system. All right, on to the next topic, funding to historically black colleges and universities, HBCUs. HBCUs were suffering from low attendance and the faith-based funding ban by the federal government that weighed heavily on the schools. Some of you know that HBCUs are old, and so to attract students in their facilities, you got to get upgrades. If you don't have upgrades, you don't get students. And so the low attendance there's a direct correlation between facilities, sports programs, etc., to low attendance. Yeah. And so there was a cycle. And because of the facility condition, the HBCUs were suffering, especially the small ones. And so Donald Trump, under what's called the Future Act, write that down, the Future Act, he signed a bipartisan bill that permanently provided more than $250 million a year to HBCUs, along with the dozens of other institutions that serve large shares of minority students. That was done in December 2019. This impacted approximately 250,000 predominantly black students. Yeah. So for all of you that want to continue to call him a racist and not do your homework simply because he was sued in a racial discrimination matter in New York, that's bad, and he paid the price for that. Yeah. Uh, we've got to look at the fruit. You know a tree by its fruit. Black people did not put Donald Trump in office. So if he was a racist, and that was his guiding principle, he would not have helped HBCUs in the way that he did. That's just a fact. Next topic, Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. This is the economy. And this is his third key legislative victory. He had more. But sometimes you judge a president by their legislative victories. I don't hear anybody talking about these three victories. I don't hear it. The Futures Act, First Step Act, now Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. This was the biggest reform to the tax code since 1986. It lowered the corporate rate from 35% to 21%, which then allows small business owners to keep more of their money so that they can put it back into their businesses to benefit those employees. Certainly, it also benefits the owner. Of course, it ought to. But the owner wants to perpetuate his small business. So that means hiring more employees, that means upgrading facilities, et cetera, et cetera. All right. In October 2020, the IRS released its final report on taxes paid by income group in the 2018 tax year, the first year for which people paid taxes under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. The data shows that the tax cuts as a percentage of taxes paid in 2017 were, get this, largest for the lowest income Americans and smallest for the top 1%, which was measured by adjusted gross income. Similarly, the percentage decrease in effective tax rates was about 5% for the highest income group and 16% for the half of Americans whose income is below the median. After the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, higher income taxpayers now pay a larger share of all taxes. Now, let me say that again. After the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, higher income taxpayers now pay a larger share of all taxes. By this metric, the income tax system was made more progressive, not regressive, progressive. The top 1% of taxpayers paid 40% of income taxes in 2018 and 38% in 2017. That's called an increase. The fact is, Republicans' 2017 tax reform law did exactly what was promised. It lowered taxes for all income groups, provided the greatest benefits for middle income households, and spurred economic growth that helped reduce poverty and improve prosperity. That was reported by The Hill, not a conservative publication, The Hill, in December of 2021. Look it up. An average $5,000 found its way into the pockets of Black Americans. That's the tale of the tape on the economy. Out of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, we can't forget that opportunity zones were created. Yeah, opportunity zones created across distressed zip codes nationally. Op zones brought tax incentives to developers to build in the inner city, where the broken zip codes are. This directly impacted Black communities in affordable housing, retail shopping, and food deserts. It's still going on today. Although the Opportunity Zones program will almost certainly lead to gentrification as property values increase in areas targeted for investment, it can also offer new paths to Black economic empowerment. with innovative approaches, a solid understanding of the risks and rewards of opportunity zone investing, and careful attention to regulatory requirements for maximizing tax benefits, we can leverage the Op Zone program to build wealth for Black families and revitalize our communities. That was reported by Black Enterprise in June 2019. All right. Next topic, food stamps. Every time Fox News would call me, we typically to talk about food stamps. So I know this program oh so well. Under Donald Trump, many Blacks stopped qualifying for food stamps because their wages grew too much. And some people couldn't figure out why. I thought that was a good thing, which really tells you about the mentality of too many people, too many. I celebrated the fact that people were falling off of not qualifying for SNAP because they were making too much money. That's a good thing. As of July 2019 and before the pandemic, participation in SNAP hit a 10-year low. 10-year low. That reported by PolitiFact, not a conservative fact-checking organization. 10-year low under Donald Trump. As of February 2020, over 6 million discontinued their participation in SNAP. That's a big number, y'all. Of course, the pandemic reversed the downward trend. But imagine if the pandemic had not derailed Trump's economy. Families would have been better off. Now, energy independence. I remember when I first started paying attention to presidential politics. I remember as a young a boy, every president running ran on energy independence. That was a primary campaign talking point. I'm going to make the United States energy independent, and everybody would clap. State of the Union. Go back and watch them. They all said it. They didn't do it. They didn't do it. Under Donald Trump, crude production increased 27.6%, reversing the Obama war on coal and making the U.S. a net exporter of energy. Yeah. The U.S. became the largest net exporter of energy under Donald Trump in a very, very short period of time. It's a head scratcher. It makes you ask yourself, why did no former president do it? They must have been being paid off to not do it. That's the only thing that makes sense to me. Trump did this by robust energy policies like the XL pipeline and drilling permits in Alaska, instead of promoting a self-centered view of climate change. Self-centered, why do I say that? For man to think that we can take the global climate and change it, that's just narcissistic. We should have care for our society, our community, the environment. Of course we should. But to suggest that man can come together and somehow save the planet is a bunch of hooey, a bunch of baloney. Yeah, of course we should care for our environment. We should care for not polluting, etc. But let's not be so grand to think that we can save a planet. This is God's creation. He'll do with it what he will do. Yeah. Presidents before Donald Trump, dating back to the mid-70s, as I said, all promised to make America energy independent. Trump did it. Here's a key indicator. I love this. Under Donald Trump, the national average for gasoline was $2.81. Can you just imagine? My goodness, I pulled up some of the old photos I had during the Trump administration of gas prices. 281, folks, was the highest. I remember 235 in Los Angeles, of all places, where it's typically higher than the national average. I couldn't believe it. It's just such a memory that I've lived so long under gas prices in Los Angeles that reached nearly $7 under Joe Biden. It's hard to even remember gas prices being as low as 235. When I was going back and studying it, I just couldn't even, my goodness, that alone should be enough. Of course, they're quick to say that presidents have no impact on gas prices. But I remember when gas prices under George W. Bush were soaring because of the how much we were being charged per barrel. And George Bush just said one thing about the United States turning inward to combat these rising prices. And overnight, prices began to go down. So don't tell me that the president has nothing to do with gas prices. I saw it for myself. And so now under Joe Biden, we have a national average of $5.07, up from the national average of $2.81. This is a regressive uh, policy, hurting people downstream, people at the pump who have an income that is less than the national average. Yeah, it's hurting poor folks. This is bad. This is bad. This is going to bear itself out at the polls this November. Now on to the next topic, the judiciary. Trump filled 1/3 of the Supreme Court, nearly 30% of the appellate court seats, and a quarter of district court seats. That's big, yo. That's big, folks. That's big. For the first time, the Ninth Circuit of Court of Appeals, the Ninth Circuit, they had a monopoly. So many decisions came out of the Ninth Circuit. But that monopoly over influence was stopped dead in its tracks under Donald Trump. That was a huge victory. And then, of course, because of the 3 Supreme Court justices Donald Trump appointed to the bench legally. I'm so tired of hearing people say it was illegal. Just because the Senate used the rules that Harry Reid put in place to prevent Merrick Garland from being on the Supreme Court doesn't mean that Donald Trump's picks were illegal. So please stop that foolishness. I hear that so often. Everybody wants to make anything that Donald Trump did illegal. He was an illegitimate president. Right. These seats were filled, and guess what? Roe v. Wade, the very thing that people said could never be overturned, was indeed overturned. My God. And we saved babies who otherwise would have indiscriminately been aborted by this culture that aborts children like they're chewing gum. And these babies that we are so disappointed whose lives were saved were disproportionately black. Let that sink in. Yeah. Every time you see somebody marching for abortion rights, what you should be saying to yourself is they're marching to abort black babies, because that's exactly what they're doing. That leads me to the next topic, abortion and the level of legalization. It is perhaps no surprise that adults in the United States who identify as Democrats are far more likely to favor the legalization of abortion, with 60% of Democrats surveyed in 2023 supporting the legalization of abortion under any circumstance. Any. I didn't use protection and now I'm pregnant. I need to get this out of me. Yeah, that's what they're doing. This position was supported by only 8% of Republicans. Let that sink in. Trump single-handedly overturned Roe v. Wade, sending the question of abortion back to the states where it belonged under the 10th Amendment. The Constitution says whatever is not mentioned here in this document is sent back to the states. It is their purview if it's not mentioned in the Constitution. That's exactly what happened under the Dobbs case. The Supreme Court rightly found that there was no right of abortion of the United States Constitution. There's a privacy right that was created by the court under Roe v. Wade was unconstitutional. That was the right decision, whether you like it or not. A strict reading of the Constitution would have, if we had strict constructions that were a majority on the court, this would have it would have been sent back to the state long ago. Thank God that it did. Roe was unconstitutional many years ago when it was put into place in 1973. Next topic, and I'm almost done. The wealth gap. I talked about it earlier. I mentioned it earlier. Whites have 7 times more wealth than blacks. $171,000 to $17,600. That's right. Big gap. Guess what helps us bridge that? Making housing access, not housing, but purchasing homes more available across the board. That is the biggest way to bridge the wealth gap. Of course, we've got to turn back the horrible impacts of segregation in our school system. See, in 1954, when Brown v. Board of Education was decided, and segregation in schools was ended. I misspoke. Segregation was ended. That is when we had what's called white flight. White students left the public, by and large, left the public school system for parochial school and private school. Blacks went into the public school system after Brown v. Board of Education, and the schools turned, where they were dilapidated, books were fewer. Certainly, the access to technology in our schools waned very quickly. It wasn't even there at the time. But as someone who started 3 charter schools as a board member in Los Angeles, I know a little bit about this. And so we have to understand that getting a good quality education is actually the civil rights movement of our time. It is not race. It is not climate change. Sorry. Those idols in the culture pale in comparison to the problem that we have in education for our youth. They are 2 or 3 grades behind. And certainly in Los Angeles, these students are being passed right out of high school and they can't even read or write. That is our American problem. Now, here we are in conclusion. And I hope you've learned something today, something that you didn't know. If you're a black voter and you don't understand why I, as a black conservative Republican, would have voted for Donald Trump in 2016, now you know. You don't have to vote for Donald Trump, but don't tell me that he didn't do anything for black people. Barack Obama did far less. Everybody knows that. I'm not going to beat up on him. That's a different show. But don't tell me that Donald Trump didn't do anything for black people. And as you are deciding who to vote for this November, just decide from an informed place. Don't go into the voting booth and vote for somebody else just because you think Donald Trump is a racist. That is a bunch of baloney. What about Charlottesville? Yeah, you should go back and look at the whole tape on Charlottesville. He denounced the racists. He denounced them. But your media doesn't tell you the whole story. So you should be mad at them for misinforming you. All right? Under Donald Trump, blacks have a better opportunity to earn and stay alive, to take care of the generations to come. Yeah. Better chance under Donald Trump. That's why you've got Snoop Dogg, you've got 50 Cent, you got Ice Cube, and many, many others now unafraid to make it more clear that they see the light. Somebody said, under Donald Trump, we got the bag. Yeah, and it's true. So you got to be careful what you vote for. You must also always vote your own interest. Got to vote your own interest. So if we focus on bringing public schools up to par, giving equal access to capital for small businesses, placing responsibilities on fathers to father their children and insert themselves over these abortion issues that are running rampant in the Black community, the Black community can indeed reshape itself for generations to come. Thank you so much. That concludes our show. Thank you for joining me. If you like the show, please subscribe and download the podcast. That's really important. This is the Marc Little Show. I am Marc Little. I'm a pastor, I'm a lawyer, and a political commentator. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for joining us for this edition of the Marc Little Show, presented by Cure America Action. If you'd like to find out how you can bookmark for your next speaking engagement, go to cureaction.com. That's cure-action.com. And then just click on the Bookmark tab. Also, if you want to ensure that our government is working for the people, be sure to sign up for our newsletter to keep up with the latest from our nation's capital. You can sign up for that at cureaction.com. Again, that's cure-action.com. Finally, be sure to follow Marc on his social media pages. On Instagram, search for Real Marc with a C, T Little. And on Facebook and Twitter, just type in Marc with a C, Little in your internet browser. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks again for joining us. Be sure to tune in next week for another edition of the Marc Little Show, presented by Cure America Action.
The Marc Little Show is brought to you by Cure America Action Incorporated. Cure America Action is a 501c4 nonprofit organization that advocates for conservative principles based on Christianity, capitalism, and the Constitution. The organization engages in social warfare activity and promotes policies and legislation in distressed zip codes throughout America. To learn more about Cure America Action, you can visit us at cure-action.com. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Marc Little Show, presented by Cure America Action.